The idea of the big tent in politics is something that the Democratic Party endorsed a long time or embraced a long time ago, but the time has come when it's really starting to evaporate and the tent is collapsing. That's what we're going to talk about today in the context of the politics of the culture wars, of abortion, some of this anti Semitism debate, and a number of other topics that are really tearing the Democratic Party apart. Now, before I go on, I want you to like the video and also to subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet, and then hit the bell for notifications, as well as subscribe to me on BitChute and on Minds, as well as contribute on the Subscribe Star website. My screen name is Chef Leopard on all of those, and you can also find me on Gab at Starscream85. Anyway, when you look at the Democratic Party today, their focus is entirely at the moment on pleasing the diversity mafia. The real problems of today, I think, with opioids addiction and immigration, as well as some of these class issues, talking about just in the last video, if you saw on Sunday night with Andrew Yang, talking about automation, making many positions obsolete in the future. Those are issues that transcend race and they transcend gender. Of course, not all of them affect every one of those categories equally. But you can't tell me that people who live in the middle of Indiana aren't feeling affected by some of these issues, especially if you're talking about drug addiction or substance abuse or spousal abuse or things like that. So what they're doing here is essentially alienating people. So this first article, we're going to go through a number of examples and try to really look at different ways that the Democratic Party is alienating different people. So this is from New York City. It says schools chancellor Richard Carranza is accused of demoting admins because they were white. And it says that 4 top Department of Education executives from New York City have been demoted or stripped of duties under Carranza's sweeping reorganization, are poised to sue the city, claiming he has created an environment which is hostile towards whites, a source told the Post. The women, all white veteran administrators, contend they were pushed aside for less qualified persons of color. These decisions are being made because DOE leadership believes that skin color plays a role in how to get equity, that white people can't convey the message, said a source familiar with the complaints. There's a toxic whiteness concept going on. Davida Perry, managing partner of Schwartz, Perry and Heller, a law firm focusing on employment discrimination and sex harassment cases, represents the women. She declined to comment pending the filing of the suit, which is expected within 2 weeks. Under Carranza's leadership, sources said whites in some cases are being told they must give up power or lose responsibilities no matter how well they have performed. So what this goes through, and this is actually a good article. A lot of the stuff the New York Post publishes is really cringy and sensationalist clickbait. This one is not. This is stuff that I think is very worrying, and it seems like they have the sourcing right, because they talk about a number of these consultants that are being contracted by the city in order to improve diversity. And the real problem with that is that when you set out with a goal of, changing the complexion of a company, there are a couple ways to do that. A is bring new people in, and B is to move other people out. And often they go in tandem. And when you're talking about people at the top, these are people who often have built their entire career, and they don't want to necessarily move on. They've probably, they might have come from out of state and they've built a life in the city, and now they're being told, well, you are done, and we're going to move to somebody who fits this new profile that we want. And that's really why I'm a little surprised that they would shoot themselves in the foot this bad, because I'm not going to say New York City schools are amazing. I don't know from personal experience whether that's correct or incorrect, but you'd have to find it very surprising if the people who are suing the school district now, or the Department of Education of New York City, would be some sort of Hicktown Republican, classic Bible Belt racist, that's the caricature in the minds of the left. It's almost so we don't have their identities, but if they had been that way, then how come we wouldn't have known until now? And how come this racist structure within the New York City public schools wasn't such a topic of conversation until suddenly this new administrator, who's a stooge of Bill de Blasio, is now in power? And by the way, de Blasio, while this whole thing is going on, is campaigning in Iowa, which is one of the whiter states in the country. It's gradually there's more Hispanics moving into Iowa, but for the most part, no. It's mostly a state where there's salt of the earth people. And here's a quote. It says, "There's been a lot of discussion about white supremacy and how it manifests itself in the workplace. Conversations about race and looking at how the white culture behaves," said a white executive who received the training. "White supremacy is characterized by perfectionism, a belief in meritocracy, and the Protestant work ethic," the exec said, adding the whites who object when accused of deep-rooted bias are called fragile and defensive. Can you imagine if we scrutinized blackness or brownness? We are being trained in anti-bias not to stereotype blacks, but they're fostering a stereotyping of whites. So that's just one example. And we'll see if this really bears fruit. It could be that the complaint will turn out to not have merit based on whatever process they have over there. But if you're seeing this type of turmoil in New York City schools, which is a fairly, I guess, progressive city, then I see a real problem with the social structure of progressive parts of the country. They're looking at perpetual revolution right now. The next exhibit is from The Root, and it has to do with the governor of Louisiana, whose name is John Bel Edwards. This is, again, a Democrat. He was elected the year before Trump was elected in 2015, and he's running for re-election this year. And what's gone on is that essentially we have a heartbeat bill that is being passed in Louisiana, the same sort of bill passed here in Ohio earlier this year. It had overwhelming popularity. It easily passed both houses of our General Assembly, and the governor, Mike DeWine, signed it gladly. And most Ohioans would probably fit in, if you looked across the entire state, would be opponents of abortion. Okay, I'm not speaking as somebody who's a hardcore anti-abortionist who support. I actually don't support the Alabama law, but in Ohio, we elected this governor consciously with the mind that he would sign this bill. In Louisiana, it's a little bit more of a hazy situation in terms of how they expected, because of course it's a Democrat, and the Democrats as a party are not really on board with restricting abortion procedures. And this is how they describe this in The Root. It says, "If you needed your weekly reminder that political party affiliation and morality are rarely intertwined, here's your refresher. Democratic Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards has signaled his support for an anti-abortion bill that would ban the procedure after 6 weeks. The bill, which bears numerous similarities to the bills passed in Georgia and Missouri," so they didn't even mention this is actually not similar to the bills over there. It's more similar to the bill here in Ohio, and I think the other place where it was passed was in Tennessee. And Florida, I don't know if it was Florida, but it was 2 or 3 states, and one of them was ours, Ohio, have passed these heartbeat bills. And yes, you can have an abortion before 6 weeks. That's a little more lenient than the one in Alabama, and there are exceptions for rape and incest here, I believe. We'll see if it includes that in in Louisiana, even though I don't see many details here. "My position hasn't changed in 8 years in the legislature. I was a pro-life legislator," Edwards told reporters Thursday. "When I ran for governor, I said that I was pro-life, and so that's something that's consistent. Senate Bill 184, which was sponsored by Democratic State Senator John Milkovich, prohibits abortion once a heartbeat is detected. So this is actually sponsored in the Senate by a Democrat, the Democratic State Senate. Again, since we seem to have to write this same story about a different state every few days, 6 weeks provides women with mere days to detect and terminate a pregnancy, thereby all but outlawing abortion. I want to stress this too, okay? So they want to bring that up. If you are of sound mind and you've had unprotected sex and you don't want to have a child, you can go to, I think it's even over the counter in most states, and get Plan B. And yes, you can get rid of the pregnancy. And it's not necessarily the most healthy pharmaceutical, but it is an option, and it is a little bit better than waiting to get an abortion. The bill would also penalize doctors who perform abortions with a $1,000 fine or up to 2 years in prison, though Louisiana's bill allows exceptions to the ban either to prevent death or serious risk of the substantial and irreversible impairment of a major bodily function. A spokeswoman with Edwards' office told CNN that the governor would be inclined to sign the bill if it reached his desk, though he finds himself at odds with the larger Democratic Party. Edwards signed a bill last year that banned abortion after 15 weeks, a law put on hold after a federal judge blocked a similar bill in Mississippi last year. Certainly he wants to see the final bill first, spokeswoman Christina Stevens told CNN. This is very much in line with his previous pro-life votes and actions. Edwards is up for re-election in October and believes Louisianians to be overwhelmingly pro-life. The bill heads to the House floor for a final vote before heading to Edwards for his signature. Though state lawmakers stipulate that the bill will only go into effect if a federal appeals court upholds the heartbeat bill signed in Mississippi this past March. So let's look at a few of the comments. So most of these are not very, I guess, laudatory. And a lot of these people are like, they're calling anybody who attacks this point of view an incel, but they never seem to realize that the obvious rejoinder is that a lot of these women who are supporting the Planned Parenthood side are basically cat ladies. They're women. It's actually more of an issue for women not to have children, typically because, as you might know, okay, if you look at many economic studies about aging and income, a lot of men tend to make more money as they grow older. Okay, obviously there's people who are forced into early retirement and they don't, but with women it's much harder to make money the older you get because it's just a social issue that you could call it an issue of sexism, where women are less valued because of their looks, whereas men can get away with looking basically like a pile of cardboard. But that's the way it is, and therefore, if you don't have children as a man, and you don't necessarily, now it's not great, but you're you're less likely to have to depend on your kids when you get older than a woman might. Also, men tend to live shorter lives anyway, so I think most men don't give a crap anyway. So you have a lot of these people who are, they're pretty much belly aching about this bill, which I don't know what they want, because he said that he was pro-life when he ran for office, and it doesn't matter if by the way, this is one of the reasons that Republicans are very, they don't like Susan Collins, they don't like Lisa Murkowski, because they're pro-choice Republicans, but the people in their state elect them. There's nothing you can do about it. It's the way of the world that sometimes you have to endure the fact that people who are douches win elections. Now for this case, which is related. Progressives are calling for a party purge of Democratic pro-lifers. So you have here Pramila Jayapal and a number of other people who are saying, I think we should allow for strong primary challenges so that people can really put their Democratic chops on the line, if you will, and let the Democratic voters decide who they want. So this could be a major pitfall for people like Bel Edwards and some of these other centrist Democrats, because it actually lists a number of people here. It says currently there are 5 pro-life Democratic officials in all of Congress, such as Representatives Dan Lipinski of Illinois, Colin Peterson of Minnesota, and Henry Cuellar of Texas, as well as Senate Democrats Joe Manchin of West Virginia and Bob Casey of Pennsylvania. So what she doesn't realize is that if you go to any of those states, and I'll just take the 2 that are closest to me, West Virginia and Pennsylvania. For pro-choice in West Virginia, forget about it. Plus, Joe Manchin just got reelected last year, so why are they even? They didn't mention him by name, but this article does. Bob Casey in Pennsylvania, I don't remember when he's up for reelection. Those 2 states, if you want any chance of being elected, you have to basically be either pro-life or very standoffish about abortion, because you can't win Pennsylvania with just the cities of Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. Plus, I would wager that there's a growing current of pro-life activism that's growing especially in Philadelphia now with the whole Brian Sims cluster F. So these people are basically saying to many people within the party, look, you're not welcome anymore. You might as well leave. And those people, once they leave, who do you think that they're going to vote for? They're not going to vote for. They might not vote at all. They might end up voting for independents. They might cross over to the GOP. But the bottom line is, you need people to fill the box, pull the lever for you, and telling them to go away simply by virtue of the fact that they don't agree with you on one position is not the way to grow a party. Obviously, I would be the first to say this, okay? For those of you that are saying, you're trying to say that the Democrats shouldn't stand for anything, I'm not saying that. If you stand for everything, you stand for nothing. You can't be both pro-life and pro-choice at the same time. But there's a difference between being somebody who's sitting on the fence and being somebody who, there's a difference between taking a strong position, like saying you are definitely pro-life or definitely pro-choice, and going to people and saying, well, you don't belong with us because you're pro-life or pro-choice. That, I think, is really one of the weaknesses right now of the Democratic Party. It says here, earlier this week, Representative Rocana of California, a fellow progressive, made similar statements saying that the last person that the DCCC should be supporting is pro-life Democrat Rep. Dan Lipinski. And that would actually be a disaster for the Democrats if they. Now, I think if they were to get a pro-choice person nominated in Illinois against and defeat Dan Lipinski, it's possible that person would win that election because Lipinski happens to be in a staunchly Democratic district. But if people in that district, which I believe has a lot of Catholic and ethnic voters, people who are like Polish, I think he's Polish, or people who, Italian, Hungarians, or people like that, those people might decide, well, this was the type of Democrat we wanted. We might now vote for the new Democrat that comes in and is nominated. Things like that do happen. They'd have to be paying attention, but we don't know yet.